It was 3 in the morning when the phone rang. Not her phone. The blood-smeared burner phone she found clutching the hand of an unconscious girl behind a dumpster. Sarah thought she was just doing a good deed. She thought she was saving a junkie from an overdose. But when a voice on the other end answered cold, deep, and terrifyingly calm, she realized she hadn't just found a girl. She had found leverage. And the man coming to collect it wasn't calling the police. He was bringing a war. This is the true story of how a waitress at a roadside diner accidentally became the most important woman in the mob's underworld. Buckle up. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Sarah Miller wiped her hands on her stained apron, the smell of stale coffee and bacon grease clinging to her hair like a second skin. It was 3:17 a.m. The graveyard shift at Sal's 24-hour diner was usually quiet, populated only by long-haul truckers and insomniacs nursing cheap pie. But tonight, the air felt heavy. The humidity pressed against the plate glass windows, blurring the headlights of the cars passing on State Route 99. "Hey, Sarah Trash, run!" Sal shouted from the kitchen, the clatter of pans punctuating his rasp. "I'm going, Sal." "Keep your shirt on," Sarah muttered, grabbing the heavy black bags. She kicked the back door open, bracing herself against the gust of wind and rain. The alley behind the diner was a graveyard of broken bottles and wet cardboard. The single sodium light bulb above the door flickered, casting twitchy yellow shadows against the brick wall. Sarah heaved the bags into the dumpster, the plastic straining. She wiped the rain from her eyes, turning to go back inside when a flash of white caught her peripheral vision. It was a sneaker. A pristine white designer sneaker. Balenciaga, maybe. Sarah knew brands only from magazines she couldn't afford. She drove a beat-up 2008 Honda Civic and lived in a studio apartment the size of a closet. That sneaker didn't belong in an alley behind Sal's. "Hello," Sarah called out, her voice trembling slightly. She took a step forward. Behind a stack of wooden pallets, a figure lay crumpled in the mud. Sarah dropped her guard and rushed forward, her nursing school training abandoned 2 years ago, when the tuition money ran out, kicking in. The girl was young, maybe 19. Her expensive silk blouse was torn at the shoulder, and her dark hair was matted with rain and something darker. Blood. "Hey, can you hear me?" Sarah knelt in the mud, ruining her jeans checking for a pulse. It was thready weak. The girl's skin was clammy, her lips tinged with blue. "Overdose," Sarah whispered to herself. She checked the girl's arms. No track marks. She checked her pupils. Pinpricks. Then the phone rang. It wasn't Sarah's phone. It was coming from the girl's clutch, which lay open in a puddle. It was a sleek black device, unbranded. No case. It vibrated violently against the asphalt. Sarah hesitated. The screen didn't show a number. It just said, "Papa." If this girl was in trouble, her dad needed to know. Sarah snatched the phone up with wet hands and swiped right. "Hello. Listen, I found your daughter. Do not speak." The voice on the other end stopped Sarah's heart. It wasn't panicked. It wasn't loud. It was a baritone rumble, absolute and terrifyingly calm. It sounded like the click of a gun's safety being switched off. "Who is this?" the voice asked. I'm a waitress at Sal's diner on Route 99. Look, she's unconscious. She's bleeding. I'm calling 911. "You will not call 911, the man commanded. The authority in his voice was so heavy, Sarah actually froze her thumb, hovering over her own phone. If you call an ambulance, the people who did this to her will find her before I do. Is she breathing? Barely, Sarah stammered, looking down at the girl. She's turning blue. I think she's going into shock. Listen to me very carefully, the man said. I am 3 minutes away. If she dies, you die. Keep her alive. Stay off the line. Click. Sarah stared at the phone. If she dies, you die. She looked down at the girl. The rain was intensifying. Sarah didn't know who this papa was, but she knew fear when she heard it, and she knew physiology. Okay. Sarah breathed, adrenaline flooding her system. Okay, not on my watch. She didn't wait for the man. She scooped her arms under the girl's shoulders. The girl was dead weight, but Sarah was used to carrying trays stacked with heavy plates and moving kegs. Grunting with effort, she dragged the girl out of the mud, kicking the back door open, and pulled her into the dry, dimly lit hallway near the kitchen storage. Sal! Sarah screamed. Get the first aid kit, the big one. She laid the girl on the concrete floor. She ripped the silk blouse open to find the wound. It wasn't a gunshot. It was a puncture wound, small and precise, right near the liver. A knife. Number. An injection. Sarah leaned down, smelling the girl's breath. It didn't smell like alcohol. It smelled like bitter almonds. Cyanide. Number too fast. Sarah's mind raced back to her toxicology textbooks. Synthetic opioids. Insulin. The back door slammed open. It wasn't Sal. 3 black SUVs screeched into the alleyway, blocking the exit. The headlights cut through the rain, blindingly bright. Car doors slammed in unison. Sarah stood up, placing herself between the unconscious girl and the door. She grabbed the nearest weapon she could find, a heavy cast-iron skillet from the drying rack. A shadow filled the doorway. The man who stepped into the fluorescent hum of the diner's back hallway was huge. He had to duck slightly to clear the frame. He wore a charcoal wool trench coat that looked like it cost more than the diner itself, tailored to fit broad, powerful shoulders. His hair was silver at the temples, swept back, and his face was a map of hard lines and cold calculation. But it was his eyes that terrified Sarah. They were grey, like dirty ice, and they swept the room with the precision of a predator. Dominic the Dom Cavallo. Sarah didn't know the name. She didn't read the crime beat section of the newspaper, but she felt the gravity of his presence. Behind him, 2 other men squeezed in, holding suppressed assault rifles at the low ready. Back away from her, Dominic said. His voice was the same one from the phone. Sarah gripped the cast-iron skillet tighter, her knuckles white. She's unstable. If you move her now, without stabilizing her neck, you could kill her. One of the armed men, a scar-faced brute named Luca, stepped forward, raising his weapon. Boss said, "Move, sweetheart." "Wait," Dominic said, raising a hand. He looked at Sarah. Really looked at her for the first time. He saw the grease on her apron, the defiance in her jaw, and the skillet raised like a shield. He looked past her to his daughter Sophia lying on the concrete. "Sophia," Dominic whispered, the mask slipping for a fraction of a second. He knelt beside his daughter, ignoring the mud ruining his Italian suit trousers. He touched her cheek. "She's freezing. She's in hypovolemic shock." Sarah snapped her fear, momentarily overridden by her medical instinct. "And I think she's been dosed with something. Her pupils are pinned, but her breath smells sweet. Ketamine or a synthetic sedative." Dominic looked up at Sarah. "You're a doctor, nursing school dropout," Sarah said. "And if you drag her into a car now, she'll aspirate. Turn her on her side. Now." Dominic hesitated, then nodded to Luca. "Do as she says." "Boss, we have to go. The Irish are probably 5 minutes behind us," Luca hissed, checking his watch. "We don't move her until she's stable." Dominic roared, the sound echoing off the tile walls. He looked back at Sarah. "What do you need? Who? Blankets, heat? And do you have Narcan or adrenaline? Medical kit, SUV-2, now." Dominic ordered the second guard. Within seconds, the hallway was a makeshift trauma center. Sarah worked with a focus that surprised even herself. She elevated Sophia's legs on a stack of flour sacks. She wrapped her in the thermal blankets from the SUV. She directed the Mafia boss, the man who probably ordered hits before breakfast, to hold his daughter's head. "She's not waking up," Dominic said, his voice tightening. For the first time, the monster of Seattle sounded like a terrified father. "Her heart rate is dropping," Sarah said, her fingers on Sophia's carotid artery. "She's bradycardic. We need to get her to a hospital. Street. Jude's is 10 minutes away." "No hospitals," Dominic said sharply. "No police. No paper trails." "She could die," Sarah screamed at him. "This isn't a mob movie. She needs a ventilator." "We have a private facility," Dominic said, standing up and towering over Sarah. "And you're coming with us." "Excuse me." Sarah stepped back, hitting the shelving unit. "You know what she's been dosed with. You know her vitals, and you've seen my face." Dominic buttoned his coat. It wasn't a request. Luca grabbed the girl, carefully. "You," he pointed at Sarah, in the car. "I can't just leave. I'm on shift. Sal will be compensated," Dominic said. He pulled a thick roll of $100 bills from his pocket and tossed it onto a tray of defrosting burger patties. "That buys the diner." And his silence. Before Sarah could protest, the second guard grabbed her arm. It wasn't painful, but it was firm. There was no arguing with these men. They moved with military efficiency. Sophia was loaded into the back of the lead SUV. Sarah was shoved into the middle seat of the second vehicle, right next to Dominic. As the doors slammed shut and the locks engaged with a heavy thud, Sarah looked out the window. Sal was standing at the back door, holding the money, looking confused and terrified. "Where are you taking me?" Sarah asked, her voice small. Dominic didn't look at her. He was staring at the tablet mounted on the back of the driver's seat, watching the GPS tracker of the lead car. He pulled a silver pistol from his holster and placed it on his lap, checking the chamber. "Somewhere safe," Dominic said. "Or somewhere you'll be buried. That depends entirely on whether my daughter wakes up." The SUV surged forward, the engine roaring like a beast tearing out of the alley and onto the rain-slicked highway. Sarah watched her life, her crappy job, her beat-up car, her freedom disappear in the rearview mirror. "I didn't hurt her," Sarah whispered. "I found her." Dominic turned his head slowly. The passing streetlights strobed across his face. "In my world, Miss Miller, Sarah Miller. In my world, Ms. Miller, there are no coincidences. A waitress finding the daughter of the Capo dei Capi behind a dumpster at 3 a.m. He shook his head slowly. "You better pray you're just a good Samaritan, because if I find out you were planted there, I will peel your life apart, layer by layer." Sarah swallowed hard. She looked at his hands that were currently trembling just slightly. "She's allergic to penicillin," Sarah blurted out. Dominic frowned. "What? Your daughter, Sophia? She has a medical alert bracelet. I saw it when I checked her pulse." If your private doctor gives her a standard antibiotic cocktail to prevent infection from the cut, she'll go into anaphylactic shock. Dominic stared at her. The silence in the car was suffocating. He picked up his phone and dialed. "Tell the doc no penicillin. Sulfur drugs only. She's allergic." "Yes, I'm sure." He hung up. He looked at Sarah again, and the ice in his eyes thawed just a fraction of a degree. "You observe well," he muttered. "I observe everything," Sarah said, finding a backbone she didn't know she had. "Like the fact that your daughter wasn't mugged. She still had her diamond earrings. Whoever did this wanted to send a message, not steal." Dominic's jaw clenched. A muscle feathered in his cheek. "You talk too much for a hostage." "I'm not a hostage," Sarah said, though she felt like one. "I'm the only one in this car who cares about her medical chart more than her last name." Dominic remained silent for the rest of the drive. The convoy sped toward the industrial district, weaving through the labyrinth of warehouses near the docks. They pulled up to a nondescript steel building with no signage. The garage door rolled up. The SUVs rolled in. As Sarah was hustled out of the car, she saw the environment change. This wasn't a warehouse. It was a fortress. Armed men patrolled the catwalks. A sterilized glass room stood in the center, a fully equipped operating theater. They rushed Sophia inside. "Stay here," Luca growled at Sarah, pushing her onto a leather sofa in the waiting area outside the glass. "Don't move." Sarah sat her hands shaking. Through the glass she watched the medical team swarm Sophia. Dominic stood right against the glass, his hand pressed flat against it, looking like a ghost haunting his own life. Sarah looked around the room. It was filled with expensive art leather furniture and the smell of cigar smoke and gun oil. On the coffee table in front of her was a file folder stamped "Confidential." Curiosity was a dangerous thing, but Sarah had already been threatened with death tonight. She glanced at Luca. He was distracted, talking into his earpiece. Sarah leaned forward and nudged the folder open with her finger. A photograph slid out. It was a picture of her, Sarah Miller. Taken 3 days ago, walking into the diner. Her breath hitched in her throat. "Why do you have a picture of me?" she whispered to the empty room. Suddenly, the doors to the medical bay burst open. The doctor, a balding man in blue scrubs, ran out, looking pale. "Mr. Cavallo," the doctor stammered. "We have a problem. The toxicology report is back." Dominic turned his face a mask of fury. "What is it?" "It's not a street drug," the doctor said. "It's a proprietary neurotoxin, the kind used by the Vitti family." Dominic went still. "Vitti? My own lieutenant." "And?" The doctor hesitated, glancing at Sarah sitting on the couch. "The only known antidote requires a specific enzyme match for synthesis. We need a blood donor, immediate relative, or someone with a rare O-negative variation." Dominic cursed. "I'm A positive." Sarah stood up slowly. The room spun. "I'm O-negative," she said. Dominic and the doctor turned to stare at her. "Test her," Dominic ordered. "Now." As Luca grabbed her arm again to drag her into the medical bay, Sarah's mind reeled back to the photo on the table. They had been watching her. Before tonight. Before the alley. This wasn't an accident. And as the needle pierced her vein, Sarah realized she wasn't just a witness anymore. She was the key. The hum of the centrifuge was the only sound in the room, a rhythmic whirring that matched the pounding in Sarah's temples. She was lying on a gurney, a thick tube running from her left arm into a machine which then fed into another tube connected to Sophia. The girl looked like a porcelain doll broken by a careless child. Her skin was translucent, the blue tinge around her lips slowly fading to a pale pink, as Sore's O-negative blood, rich with the synthesized enzymes the doctor had frantically prepared, cycled into her system. Sarah felt cold. Bone-deep cold. Losing a pint of blood was one thing. A direct, high-volume transfusion, while stressed and dehydrated, was another. Dominic Cavallo sat in a leather armchair between the two gurneys. He hadn't moved for an hour. He had discarded his trench coat, rolling up the sleeves of his white dress shirt, to reveal forearms corded with muscle and a faded tattoo on his left wrist. Omerta. He wasn't looking at his daughter. He was watching Sarah. "You're shaking." Dominic stated, his voice devoid of the earlier aggression replaced by a clinical observation. "I'm freezing." Sarah chattered, pulling the thin hospital blanket tighter with her free hand. "And I'm lightheaded. You took a lot." Dominic signaled to the corner of the room. "Luca, get her a steak, rare, and spinach. She needs iron." "I'm a vegetarian," Sarah mumbled, her eyes drooping. Dominic raised an eyebrow. "Not tonight, you're not. You eat what I tell you to eat, or you pass out and die. I don't need 2 corpses tonight." "You have a terrible bedside manner." Sarah slurred, the exhaustion finally winning. "I'm not a doctor, Ms. Miller. I'm a businessman." Sarah forced her eyes open, locking onto his grey stare. The adrenaline was fading, leaving room for the anger to return. "About that business. The photo." Dominic stiffened. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What photo?" "Don't play dumb," Sarah whispered, though her voice lacked force. "On the table outside, in the folder. You had a picture of me, taken days ago. You were stalking me before I found her." Dominic's expression didn't change, but the air in the room shifted. He stood up, walked to the door, and snapped his fingers. Luca handed him the folder Sarah had seen earlier. Dominic flipped it open. He stared at the photo of Sarah in her diner uniform. He flipped the page. There were bank statements, her address, a copy of her nursing school transcript, and a photo of a man Sarah hadn't seen in 5 years. Her brother, Michael. Dominic walked back to the gurney and held the photo of Michael up. "Do you know this man?" Sarah's breath hitched. That's my brother, Michael. I haven't spoken to him since 2018. He's in rehab in Arizona." "He's not in Arizona," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "He's in Seattle, and he works for the Vitti family." The room spun. "What? This folder," Dominic said, tossing it onto her legs, "wasn't in my archives. We took it off the body of the man who dumped Sophia in the alley. My men caught up to the 3rd car that fled the scene. They didn't survive the interrogation, but they had this." Sarah stared at the folder. "I don't understand." "It means," Dominic said, leaning over her, his face inches from hers, "that finding Sophia wasn't an accident. They dumped her at your diner, on your shift, because they knew you were there." "Why?" Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. "I'm nobody." "Because Michael stole something from Vitti," Dominic explained, his tone icy. "Something worth millions. Vitti couldn't find Michael, so he decided to send a message. He poisoned my daughter a declaration of war and left her with Michael's sister to frame your family. If I had arrived 5 minutes later, my men would have found you standing over my dead daughter." I would have killed you on the spot, and Michael would have been blamed for the hit. Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. He set me up. My own brother, or Vitti set you both up. Either way. Dominic straightened, buttoning his cuffs. You are no longer a bystander, Sarah. You are a loose end. The Vitti family knows you're alive. They know you saw the drop, and now you've saved the girl they tried to kill. Dominic turned to the doctor, who was checking Sophia's monitors. Status. Stable, boss. The toxin is neutralizing. She'll wake up in a few hours. Dominic nodded. He looked back at Sarah. Unhook her. Clean her up. Take her to the penthouse suite. I want to go home, Sarah protested weakly as the nurse removed the needle from her arm. Dominic laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Home to your studio apartment with the broken lock on 4th Street. Vitti has a hit team probably tossing that place right now looking for you. You go home, you're dead by sunrise. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. You saved my daughter Sarah. That buys you my protection. It does not buy you your freedom. Until this war is over, you belong to me. Sarah woke up in a bed that cost more than her car. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, cool and silky against her skin. The room was bathed in the soft grey light of a Seattle morning. Rain streaked against floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Space Needle and the churning grey waters of Puget Sound. She sat up gasping as a wave of dizziness hit her. She was wearing a silk oversized t-shirt that wasn't hers. Her clothes, her greasy apron, her jeans were gone. Good morning. She jumped. Dominic was sitting on a velvet chaise lounge in the corner of the room, reading a physical newspaper. He was dressed immaculately in a navy suit, looking as if he hadn't spent the night watching a woman bleed into his daughter. Where am I? Sarah rasped. My penthouse. Downtown. Dominic said, not looking up from the paper. There's fresh clothes in the closet, your size. Or close enough. Bathroom is through the left door. Come out when you're decent. We have breakfast. I told you I'm not hungry. Dominic lowered the paper. The look he gave her was withering. And I told you I don't care. Eat. Sarah gritted her teeth. She climbed out of bed, her legs wobbly. She found the bathroom a marble sanctuary with a waterfall shower. She caught her reflection in the mirror. She looked pale, dark circles under her eyes, a small bruise forming in the crook of her arm where the needle had been. She washed her face, brushed her teeth with a spare toothbrush sitting on the counter, and found a pair of black yoga pants and a cashmere sweater in the closet. They fit perfectly. Too perfectly. When she emerged, a cart had been wheeled in. Silver platters covered in domes. The smell of coffee, good expensive espresso, filled the air. Dominic poured a cup and slid it across the glass table toward her. Drink. Sarah sat wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. Is Sophia okay? Dominic's hard expression softened just for a moment. She's awake, weak but awake. She's asking for the woman who found her. Can I see her? Later, Dominic said. He cut a piece of sausage and pointed it at her with his fork. First we talk about Michael. Sarah sighed, putting the cup down. I told you. I haven't seen him. He got into drugs when our mum died. He ran with a bad crowd. I tried to help him. I paid for rehab twice. Eventually, I had to cut him off. He stole my rent money. He stole my nursing school tuition. He's a grandiose thief, Dominic murmured. The Vitti family claims he stole a ledger, a digital key to their offshore accounts. Michael can barely work a smartphone, Sarah scoffed. He's not a hacker. Desperation makes people innovative, Dominic said. Listen to me, Sarah. Vitti is old school. He's brutal. He thinks Michael gave the ledger to you for safekeeping. That's insane. It is. But in our world, perception is reality. As long as Vitti thinks you have it, you are a target. And as long as you are with me. He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. He will think we are working together. So I'm bait, Sarah concluded, her voice rising. You're keeping me here to draw Vitti out. Dominic stood up, walking over to the window. I'm keeping you here because you have O-negative blood, and my daughter might need another transfusion if she relapses. And because... He hesitated. Because what? Dominic turned. The morning light caught the sharp angles of his face. He looked dangerous, yes, but also burdened. Because I owe you a debt. The Cavallo family pays its debts. Suddenly the intercom on the wall buzzed. Boss, Luca's voice crackled through. We have a situation at the lobby. A package delivery. No return address. Dominic's eyes narrowed. Clear the lobby. Bomb squad. Already done. But boss, it's not a bomb. It's a phone. It's ringing. Dominic strode to the wall panel and pressed the button. Patch it through. A voice filled the penthouse living room. It was high-pitched, manic, and familiar. Sarah. Sarah, are you there? Oh, God. Sarah, pick up. Sarah dropped her coffee cup. It shattered on the marble floor. Michael. Sarah. Michael sounded like he was hyperventilating. Listen, I didn't mean for this to happen. They made me do it. They said they'd kill you if I didn't drop the girl there. Dominic motioned for Sarah to stay silent, but she scrambled toward the intercom. Michael, where are you? I don't know. A basement. It's dark. Sarah Vitti wants the key. I told him I gave it to you. I told him it's in your locket. Sarah's hand flew to her neck. She wore a cheap silver locket, a gift from her grandmother. It was empty. You did what? Sarah screamed. Michael, you lied to them. You put a target on my back to save yourself. They were hurting me, Sarah. I had to give them something. Just give it to them, please. I don't have anything. The line crackled. A new voice came on. Smooth, oily, heavy, with a thick New York accent. This was Salvatore Vitti. Mr. Cavallo, Vitti purred. I believe you have something of mine. The girl. And the ledger. Dominic leaned into the intercom, his voice dropping to that terrifying baritone Sarah had heard in the alley. I have your death sentence, Sal. You touched my daughter. And you have my money, Vitti replied. Trade the waitress and the ledger for her brother. You have until midnight, or I send Michael back to you in pieces, starting with his fingers. The line went dead. Sarah stood frozen, the silence of the penthouse deafening. She looked at Dominic. He lied, she whispered. Michael lied to them. He told them I have this key. He bought himself time, Dominic said, his face unreadable. He traded your life for another day of his. I have to go, Sarah said, panic rising. I have to explain to them. You go out there, they grab you, they realize you don't have the key, and they kill you both, Dominic said brutally. Think, Sarah. So what do we do? Let him die? Dominic walked over to her. He crunched over the broken ceramic of the coffee cup, not caring about the mess. He stopped inches from her. He reached out and touched the locket at her throat. His fingers were warm, his touch surprisingly gentle. No, Dominic said. We don't let him die. And we don't give them you. He unclasped the locket from her neck. He opened it. Empty. We give them exactly what they want, Dominic said, his eyes gleaming with a dark plan. A ledger. A fake one. We're going to rig a trap. And who is going to deliver it? Sarah asked, trembling. Dominic looked into her eyes. The tension between them crackled fear mixed with a strange magnetic pull. I am, Dominic said. But you're going to be the distraction. Me. Tonight, Dominic said. You're not a waitress anymore. Tonight you're my fiancée. We're going to the opera. Viti will be watching. We need to make him believe you are untouchable until we lure him into the kill zone. Sarah stared at him. You want me to pretend to be yours? Dominic leaned in his lips, brushing her ear. For tonight, Sarah, you are mine. Wear the red dress in the closet. The war starts at 8 p.m. The dress was a weapon. It was crimson silk, backless, with a neckline that plunged dangerously low and a slit that rode high up her thigh. It was the kind of dress designed to stop traffic, or in this case, start a war. Sarah stared at herself in the full-length mirror of the penthouse dressing room. Her hair had been swept up by a stylist Dominic had summoned, leaving her neck exposed. The bruises on her arm were covered with theatrical makeup. She didn't look like a waitress who scraped gum off tables anymore. She looked like a Mafia queen. It fits. Sarah turned. Dominic was leaning against the doorframe. He was wearing a tuxedo classic black peak lapels, a handgun visibly printing against the silk lining of his jacket if you knew where to look. He held a small velvet box. It's tight, Sarah muttered, tugging at the bodice. I feel like a sausage in expensive casing. Dominic walked over to her. The air in the room seemed to compress. He stood behind her, his eyes meeting hers in the mirror. He didn't smile at her self-deprecation. He looked at her with a terrifying intensity. You look like distraction, he corrected. Viti has a weakness for beauty. He won't be looking at my hands. He'll be looking at you. He opened the velvet box. Inside lay the silver locket she had worn earlier, now polished to a high shine and suspended on a diamond-encrusted chain. I modified it, Dominic said, lifting the necklace. Lift your hair. Sarah obeyed, her hands shaking slightly. Dominic's fingers grazed the nape of her neck. His skin was rough, calloused gunfighter's hands. As he clasped the necklace, his knuckles brushed her bare skin, sending a jolt of electricity down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. Inside the locket, Dominic whispered, his breath hot against her ear, is a micro SD card. Viti thinks it's the ledger. It's actually a localized malware program. Once his tech guy plugs this into their mainframe to verify the accounts, it will fry their servers and ping their location to my team. So I'm walking into the opera house with a cyber nuke around my neck, Sarah said, her voice trembling. Yes. Dominic turned her around so she was facing him. He placed his hands on her bare shoulders. The heat of his palms was grounding. Stay glued to my side. If I squeeze your waist twice, you drop to the floor. Do not ask why. Just drop. Dominic, she whispered. It was the first time she'd used his first name. What if they shoot? Then I kill them, he said simply. Ready? No. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Scene cut, McCaw Hall. Seattle Opera House. The performance was Tosca. Fitting, Sarah thought. A tragedy about love, betrayal, and execution. They arrived in a black limousine. The paparazzi were there, tipped off by Dominic's PR team. Flashbulbs exploded like strobes as Dominic helped Sarah out of the car. He slid his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. To the cameras, it was a possessive embrace of a lover. To Sarah, it was a human shield. "Smile," Dominic murmured through his teeth as they walked up the red carpet. "You adore me." "I'm terrified of you," Sarah hissed back, plastering a bright fake smile on her face. "That's a form of adoration." They moved through the lobby, a sea of diamonds and tuxedos. Sarah felt eyes on her. Not just the curious stares of Seattle's elite, wondering who the waitress on Cavallo's arm was, but hard eyes. Predator eyes. "Box 4, Dominic told the usher. They took their seats in the private box. The lights dimmed. The orchestra swelled. Sarah sat in the velvet chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. Dominic sat slightly behind her in the shadows, watching the opposite balcony through a pair of opera glasses that Sarah suspected had night vision. "He's here," Dominic said softly. "Box 9. Directly across." Sarah started to look. "Don't turn your head," Dominic commanded. "Watch the stage. Let him look at you." Sarah stared at the soprano on stage, but her mind was racing. "Does he have Michael? My scouts say no. Michael is being held at a secondary location. The opera is just for the meet. Viti wants to verify you have the necklace before he authorizes the trade." Suddenly, the curtain to their box swept open. Sarah jumped. Dominic didn't flinch. His hand moved imperceptibly toward his tuxedo jacket. A man stepped in. He was short, wearing an ill-fitting suit. He held a tray of champagne. "Compliments of Mr. Viti," the man said, his voice trembling. He wasn't a waiter. He was a messenger. He placed 2 glasses on the ledge. Under one of the glasses was a napkin with a phone number scrawled on it. "Tell Mr. Cavallo," the man stammered, looking at Dominic, "that the price has gone up." Dominic stood up, looming over the small man. "The deal was the ledger for the boy. Mr. Viti likes the girl," the messenger said, glancing at Sarah. "He says, throw her in and he won't burn the boy's eyes out before he kills him." Sarah went cold. Dominic moved so fast, Sarah almost missed it. He grabbed the messenger by the throat and slammed him against the velvet-covered wall of the box. The sound was muffled by the crescendo of the orchestra. "You go back to Sal," Dominic growled, his face inches from the man's terrifyingly pale face. "You tell him to look at his phone." Dominic pulled his own phone out and pressed a button. Across the theater in Box 9, a small commotion occurred. Viti's phone had just received a live video feed. "Tell him," Dominic whispered, "that my team is currently sitting outside his mother's nursing home in Florida. If he touches the boy, Grandma Viti stops receiving her oxygen." It was a bluff. Sarah knew it had to be a bluff. Dominic had been with her all day. But the cold cruelty in his voice made her believe it. The messenger nodded frantically, gasping for air. Dominic released him. "Get out!" The man fled. Dominic sat back down, adjusting his cuffs. He picked up the champagne glass and sniffed it. "Arsenic. Amateur." "Did you mean it?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. "About his grandmother?" Dominic looked at her. The stage lights reflected in his grey eyes. "I don't kill innocents, Sarah. But Viti doesn't know that. In this world, the monster they imagine is always scarier than the monster that exists." His phone buzzed. A text message. "The docks. Pier 54. 1 hour. Bring the girl." "It's time," Dominic said, standing up. "Show's over." The rain had returned, turning the Seattle docks into a slick black oil painting. Dominic's convoy. 3 SUVs, armored and heavy, rolled silently onto Pier 54. It was a desolate stretch of concrete, surrounded by shipping containers, stacked like rusty monoliths. "Stay in the car," Dominic ordered Sarah. "No," Sarah said. She reached for the door handle. "He's my brother. I'm the one with the necklace. If Vitti doesn't see me, he shoots Michael." Dominic grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron. "This isn't a negotiation, Sarah. It's an ambush. I can feel it." "Then give me a gun," she said. Dominic stared at her. The waitress from the diner had vanished. In her place was a woman forged in the fire of the last 24 hours. He reached into his glove box and pulled out a small, snub-nosed revolver. "Safety is off. Double action. Point and squeeze. Do not hesitate." He handed it to her. It was heavy. Cold. "Let's go." They stepped out into the rain. The wind whipped Sarah's red dress around her legs, soaking the silk instantly. She didn't care. 50 yards away, under the harsh glare of a halogen floodlight, stood Salvatore Vitti. He was a bloated tick of a man in a cream-colored suit that was already ruined by the weather. Flanking him were 6 men with assault rifles, and in the middle, on his knees, was Michael. He looked terrible. His face was swollen, one eye shut. His hands were zip-tied behind his back. "Michael!" Sarah screamed, surging forward. Dominic put an arm out, stopping her. "Hold! Look at this!" Vitti shouted over the wind. "The Romeo and Juliet of the underworld. I'm touched, truly." He grabbed a handful of Michael's hair and yanked his head back. A knife glinted in Vitti's other hand, pressed against Michael's throat. "The necklace, Dom. Throw it." "Let the boy walk first," Dominic shouted back, his voice booming without effort. "Throw it." Vitti pressed the knife harder. A trickle of blood ran down Michael's neck. Dominic looked at Sarah. He nodded. Sarah unclasped the diamond locket. Her hands were slippery with rain. She looked at Vitti. "I'm throwing it. Don't hurt him." She tossed the necklace. It arced through the rain, landing on the wet concrete between the 2 groups. "Fetch," Vitti commanded one of his men. The goon ran forward, grabbed the locket, and ran back to Vitti. Vitti ripped it open, saw the chip inside, and grinned. He pocketed the necklace. "Kill them all," Vitti said casually. Sarah's blood froze. "Drop!" Dominic roared. He tackled Sarah to the ground just as the air erupted with automatic gunfire. Bullets sparked off the pavement where they had been standing a second ago. Dominic rolled, pulling his own weapon, a customized combat pistol, and returned fire with terrifying precision. Pop, 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 pop. 2 of Vitti's men dropped. "Get to cover." Dominic shoved Sarah toward a stack of steel beams. Sarah scrambled behind the metal, clutching the revolver. The noise was deafening. Screams, gunshots, the ricochet of metal on metal. "Michael!" she screamed. She peeked around the beam. In the chaos, Michael had scrambled to his feet. His zip ties had been cut. Wait, cut! How Michael wasn't running toward Sarah. He was running toward Vitti's limousine. "Michael, not that way!" she yelled. Then the world stopped. Michael stopped at the door of Vitti's limo. He turned around. He looked at Sarah. He wasn't scared anymore. He was smiling. A crooked, bloody, apologetic smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a gun. He wasn't a hostage. "Sorry, Sarah," Michael shouted. "Sal made me a better offer, 50 grand and a ticket to Mexico." Sarah stared her brain, unable to process the image. "Michael." "The ledger." Michael yelled at Vitti. "I verified it. It's the real deal. Let's go." It hit Sarah like a physical blow. Michael hadn't just framed her. He was working with them. He had lured her here, not to be saved, but to be the sacrifice so he could get paid. "He's lying," Dominic shouted from behind a concrete barrier. "Vitti the chip is a tracker." Vitti paused, looking from Dominic to Michael. "He's bluffing," Michael shrieked, aiming his gun, not at Dominic, but at Sarah. "Get in the car, Sal. We gotta go." Michael fired. The bullet struck the steel beam inches from Sarah's face, sending metal shards into her cheek. Her own brother had just tried to kill her. A roar of pure animalistic rage tore from Dominic's throat. He broke cover. He didn't care about the incoming fire. He sprinted across the open ground, moving like a demon. "No!" Sarah screamed, raising her revolver. She didn't aim at Vitti. She aimed at the tire of the limousine. Bang! The shot went wide. Bang! The limo's front tire exploded. The car swerved as the driver tried to gun it. Michael caught off balance, stumbled. Dominic was on him. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Dominic slammed into Michael, knocking the gun away. He grabbed Michael by the lapels of his jacket and head-butted him, a sickening crunch echoing through the pier. Vitti, seeing the tide turn and his car disabled, made a choice. He pushed his driver out of the way and scrambled out of the other side of the limo, running into the maze of shipping containers, abandoning his men. Dominic stood over Michael. He had his gun pressed to Michael's forehead. "Dominic, don't!" Sarah screamed, running out from cover. The gunfire had stopped. Dominic's men, led by Luca, had neutralized Vitti's remaining guards. Dominic was breathing hard, his chest heaving. Rain dripped from his nose, mixing with the blood on his face. He looked down at Michael, who was sobbing in the mud. "He shot at you." Dominic snarled, his finger whitening on the trigger. "He sold you for $50,000. "He's my brother," Sarah wept, grabbing Dominic's arm. "Please don't make me watch you kill him." Dominic looked at Sarah. He saw the anguish in her eyes, the betrayal that was hurting her more than any bullet could. Slowly, agonizingly, Dominic lowered the gun. "He is not your brother," Dominic said, his voice low and deadly. "He is a rat." He stepped back. "Luca, get him out of my sight. If I see him in Seattle again, I will skin him alive." Luca grabbed Michael, dragging him away into the darkness. Michael didn't look back at Sarah. He just wept like a coward. Sarah stood trembling in the rain. The adrenaline crashed. Her knees gave way. Dominic caught her before she hit the ground. He pulled her into his chest, wrapping his trench coat around her ruined red dress. "I've got you," he whispered into her wet hair. "I've got you." "He tried to kill me," Sarah sobbed into his shirt. "He knew." "I know," Dominic said, holding her tighter. "I know." Suddenly, Dominic stiffened. He groaned a low, guttural sound. Sarah pulled back. "Dominic." She looked at her hands. They were covered in warm, dark blood. But she wasn't bleeding. She looked at Dominic's side. The white tuxedo shirt was soaked red. "You're shot," she whispered, horror dawning on her. "Just a scratch," Dominic grunted, swaying on his feet. His face went grey. "Ricochet, I think." "Dominic!" He collapsed his heavy frame, dragging her down with him into the puddles. "Medic!" Sarah screamed, her voice tearing through the night. "Medic!" As the darkness closed in on the pier, Sarah pressed her hands against the wound in the Mafia boss's side, trying to hold his life inside his body, realizing with a terrifying clarity that she wasn't just saving him because he was her protector. She was saving him because she had fallen in love with him. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and espresso. a scent that would forever remind Sarah of the worst night of her life. It had been 6 hours since they wheeled Dominic into the surgical suite of his private estate. The bullet had missed his heart by an inch, but it had nicked an artery. He had lost a lot of blood that Sarah had tried desperately to keep inside him, with her bare hands in the back of the speeding SUV. Sarah sat on the edge of the leather sofa, still wearing the ruined red dress now dried stiff with mud and the blood of the man she loved. "Mrs. Miller." Sarah looked up. It was Luca. The giant enforcer looked tired. His dress shirt unbuttoned, his face grim. He held out a Starbucks cup. "Drink. Boss kills me if you dehydrate." Sarah took the cup, her hands trembling. "Is he?" "He's out of surgery," Luca said, sitting heavily in the chair opposite her. "The doc says he's tough as old leather. He'll make it." Sarah let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for hours. A sob escaped her throat, and she clamped a hand over her mouth. "He took a bullet for me," she whispered. "He took a bullet for his family," Luca corrected gently. "That includes you now." Luca pulled a tablet from his jacket. "You might want to see this. While the boss was in surgery, the necklace you threw at Vitti. It did its job." Sarah looked at the screen. It showed a map of Seattle with a bright red pulsing dot located in a warehouse district south of the city. The malware uploaded the second Vitti's tech guy, plugged it in to check the ledger. Luca explained with a dark grin. It fried their offshore banking servers and broadcast their GPS location to every hit man in the tri-state area with a grudge against Vitti. And then I sent a team. "Is Vitti?" "Gone," Luca said simply. "The Vitti family is no more. The war is over, Sarah." It should have made her feel better. But the victory felt hollow. Her brother was gone, exiled to a life of fear, dead to her in every way that mattered. Her old life was gone. "Can I see him?" Sarah asked. "He's waking up. He's asking for you." Sarah stood up, her legs finding strength she didn't know she had. She walked down the sterile hallway to the recovery room. Dominic looked pale against the white sheets. Monitors beeped rhythmically, a sound Sarah usually associated with her nursing training, but now it sounded like the most beautiful music in the world. It was the sound of him living. She approached the bed. His grey eyes fluttered open. They were hazy with anesthesia, but they focused on her instantly. "The dress," he rasped, his voice a dry croak. "It's ruined." Sarah laughed through her tears. She sat on the edge of the bed and took his large, rough hand in hers. "I think I can afford a new one. Or maybe I'll just go back to my apron." Dominic squeezed her hand. It was weak, but the intent was there. "No aprons. Not unless you're cooking for me." "Vitti is dead," Sarah whispered, stroking his forehead. "The necklace worked. You won." "We won," Dominic corrected. He closed his eyes for a moment, fighting a wave of pain. "Your brother. I kept my word. He's on a bus to Mexico. If he comes back..." "He won't," Sarah said, her voice hardening. "He knows what he lost." "Sarah." Dominic looked at her again, the intensity returning to his gaze, piercing through the drugs. "I told you that you were a guest until the war was over." Sarah's heart dropped. "So, I can go back to my studio apartment?" Dominic moved his hand, cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a smudge of dirt. "The war is over," he said softly. "But the debt isn't paid. You saved my daughter. You saved me, and I..." He paused, struggling with the words. I don't think I can sleep without you in this house anymore." "Is that a job offer?" Sarah asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "Live-in nurse." "No," Dominic said. "It's a proposal. Stay. Not as a hostage, not as a nurse, as my partner." Sarah looked at the man who had terrified her in an alleyway just 48 hours ago. She saw the violence in him, yes, but she also saw the fierce loyalty, the protective fire that had shielded her from bullets. She leaned down and kissed him. It was gentle, careful of his oxygen mask, but it sealed her fate. "I'm expensive," she whispered against his lips. Dominic smirked. "I own the city. I can afford you." The grand opening of the Sofia Cavallo Pediatric Wing at St. Jude's Hospital was the event of the season. Camera flashes popped like fireworks. The elite of Seattle were there sipping champagne and pretending they didn't know exactly where the funding for this state-of-the-art facility came from. Sarah stood on the balcony, looking out over the city. She wore a dress of deep emerald green. No more red was for war that hugged her curves. Her hair was styled, her makeup flawless. The grease-stained waitress was a memory. "Nervous?" Sarah turned. Sophia stood there. The girl looked healthy, vibrant, her cheeks flushed with life. She wore a dress that matched Sarah's. In the last 6 months, they had become inseparable. Sarah wasn't her mother. Nobody could replace that. But she was a sister, a mentor, and a friend. "A little," Sarah admitted. "I still feel like I'm going to drop a tray of drinks on someone." Sophia laughed. "You're the CEO of the foundation, Sarah. You don't carry trays. You hire people to carry them." A heavy, warm hand settled on Sarah's waist. Dominic appeared from the shadows of the ballroom. He looked fully recovered, the power radiating off him, stronger than ever. "They are waiting for your speech," Dominic said, kissing Sarah's temple. "I can't believe we did this," Sarah said, looking at the sign above the door. "A hospital wing. It's good. We do bad things, so we can do good things." Dominic said, his philosophy unchanged. "Balance." He turned her to face him. He reached into his pocket. "Speaking of balance," he said, "I have something for you. A trade." "I thought we were done with trades," Sarah teased. "One last transaction." Dominic pulled out a ring. It wasn't a diamond the size of a skating rink. It was a vintage ruby, dark and blood red, set in black gold. It was unique, dangerous, beautiful. "You give me your last name," Dominic said, his voice dropping to that baritone rumble that still made her shiver. "And I give you the world, and my heart, which frankly is already yours." Sarah looked at the ring, then at Sophia, who was beaming, and finally at Dominic. The monster, the father, the love of her life. "Deal," Sarah whispered. Dominic slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Now," he said, offering her his arm, "let's go tell the world that the king has found his queen." As they walked back into the light of the ballroom, Sarah didn't look back at the dark, rainy streets of Seattle. She had found her place in the chaos. She had answered the late-night call, and it had led her home. And that is the story of Sarah and Dominic, from a rain-soaked alleyway to the top of the criminal underworld. Sarah started as a waitress, trying to save a life, and ended up ruling the city. It turns out sometimes the scariest wrong number is the right call after all. I really hope you guys enjoyed this series. It was a roller coaster of betrayal, action, and romance. If you did, please hit that like button. It seriously helps the algorithm, so I can keep bringing you these long-form stories. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. And I want to hear from you in the comments. If you were, Sarah, would you have forgiven Michael, or would you have let Dominic handle him permanently? Let's argue in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.